You see, whatever Prime Minister Modi does,
Hmm.
you cannot take politics out of that. So it's an inherent thing. It wasn't an air attack. It wasn't a ground attack. This was a missile attack. So it's kind of become a state policy where basically armed militants are trained and sent across to create trouble across the border.
Hello and welcome. I'm Srinivasan. This is Talking Sense with Srini. India strikes Pakistan late last night in retribution to the ghastly Pahalgam massacre, which killed 25 Indian citizens, including a Navy officer. Joining me to discuss more is the editor-in-chief, Mr. Srinivasan. So thank you very much for your time. We had the Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri addressing the press, along with two, women army officers as well. What are your initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, thanks for getting me here, Vijay. Seeing you after a while. Uh, yes, all of us, kind of thought that after the Pulwama attack, there would be some kind of a retaliation from the Indian armed forces. All of us knew, even Pakistan knew that something of this sort is going to happen. But then that's all. If you had to compare the playbook, what happened in Balakot and now, that's where the similarity ends. Because our defense forces always work on a certain element of surprise. And what they have done this time is it wasn't an air attack, it wasn't a ground attack, this was a missile attack. So, very different. And they chose targets, not just in POK, but also deep inside Pakistan. Yes, last time also Balakot was chosen, which is inside Pakistan.
Mhm.
But this time they have chosen at least two places, Bawalpur and Munirke, which are in the Punjab province, which is actually the seat of Pakistani politics. It's heart of Pakistan. Politically, therefore, it's very significant. So the choice of locations have been different. Multiple attacks have been launched. Nine
Mhm.
sites were chosen, and the retaliation happened even while today a date was given that May 7th, people will be ready here to do the mock exercise. So when the mock exercise was on, when there was an aerial exercise which was on the borders, Indian Air Force was conducting, they brought in an element of surprise and did it last night. So that's where it slightly differs. The missile attack is what Indian government is calling it. It is precise. It was aimed with not much of a collateral damage. It only dismantled the terror infrastructure there. But the other thing which is unique here, I mean, which is interesting, is the elaborate press conference which was done.
Mhm.
And in the press conference, if you notice, they tried to connect three things. One is actually where the camp was, the distance from the border, whether it was on from international border, whether it was LOC, um, or line of actual control. Beyond, they also went to say that what kind of training was happening there, and they tried to connect that with the perpetrators who eventually came to Indian soil and carried out some of those attacks. And this linkage was, something interesting and new, which the Indian government provided. For instance, Savai Nalla in Muzaffarabad, that's
Mhm.
where it was explained to be an Lashkar-e-Taiba training center. And the Sonmarg, Gulmarg, and Pahalgam, all these three attacks, the training for all these things, the guys are trained in this particular center. Similarly, Kotli Gulpur camp, which is 30 kilometers from LOC, which make that these terrorists are active in the Rajouri Punch area, and the bus attacks on pilgrims was made from here. So I can go on and on. They similarly said how the policemen, JNK policemen, are killed because of the training that happened in Sialkot. And similarly, the most important is that Markaze Taiba camp, where Azmal Kazab, the person who was caught and then tried in India and convicted. Um, he and David Headley were trained there. And also,
That's
it gave Markaz in Bhavalpur, which is again in Punjab area of Pakistan. That's where the top terror leaders were trained. So, in that sense, this particular briefing, this particular Operation Sindoor was not able to, I mean, was able to not just to say that, okay, this is a place where the attacks carried out, it also provided all these linkages. And that made a very kind of convincing case is what the Indian military establishment and Indian government is trying to make. Look, after all, these are the terror activities which is going on for Indian soil for 3 decades and more, and we have our right to defend and take action against these camps, and that's what we have done. And they've been very specific in saying that, look, there's been no attack on the military establishment in Pakistan,
that's right.
no civilian casualties we caused, and we only attacked the training camps and tried to eliminate them. So, in that sense, I think the whole operation, the way it was planned and then it is executed, had some thinking gone into it. If you remember Balakot, what happened was a lot of questions which was raised. Yeah, where it really happened and what was the area and whether it was a jungle area, isolated, where really any damages was where happened, whether you know there were questions and questions. This time, if you notice, they in a televised press conference, they actually, you could see the missiles actually getting. I mean, the missile hits you could see, and you could see aerial pictures of those. I don't know how they were taken, what kind of missiles were used. Those are all, I think, not yet revealed. Maybe the details will come later, and these are classified information because the operations are still going on. But interesting to note that what kind of missiles they might have used. Is it surface to surface or air to surface? Or even India has now an array of, what we call as, very precise missiles we have. Whether these are ground hugging cruise missiles, whether they were used, nobody knows what
Hmm.
was used and how it was used. But then these are interesting things. It has a certain demonstration of capability. So obviously, some planning has gone. A lot of planning has gone into that, and this is quite different from what happened earlier. So
That's right.
I'm sure, therefore, the Pakistanis were also caught a bit of surprise of what happened last night.
That's right. The counterstrike has also been named as Operation Sindoor. Some reports even say that it was Prime Minister's suggestion to actually, sort of name it this way. Symbolism also plays a pivotal role on these occasions, right? I mean, we also had the press conference, where, as I already said, there were two, women army officers as well. Is there a deliberate messaging that India is trying to do for Pakistan?
You see, whatever Prime Minister Modi does,
Hmm.
you cannot take politics out of that. So it's an inherent thing, and the military officers would have given a certain strategic input. The
Hmm.
political input might have um, you know uh, uh, come from probably the prime minister himself, because he's an astute politician.
Hmm.
So while even deciding on strategic issues, on diplomatic issues, you cannot miss an element of politics in it. The whole way the name symbolism, there is a huge symbolism here because in Hindi heartland, Sindoor
Hmm.
holds a very high emotional value. Basically, all married women sport that. It's a dot on your forehead, and it's also what they call mang, the parting of the hair. That's where they put. I have been. I've seen lots of. I lived in a place. In heartland. I lived in Madhya Pradesh, Gwalior, and in the in the late 70s and the early 80s, I could recall a number of Bollywood movies which would be named after Sindoors. Say, Maa Ki Kasam, Sindoor Ki Kasam. These are all very you know, dialogues which are very, very emotionally used in these places. And
Okay.
those times, those are used when the movies are made on dacoits. Uh, you know, so here, I think it's there is an element of that emotional connect here because If you remember, there's one particular incident where husband was killed before the family members. It was a very gruesome killing in Pahalgam. What happened, because there was a message which Pakistan was sending, and they didn't just stop killing the people there, innocent people. They went far to say, go back and give this information, go spread this message. That's the kind of words they have spoken. I think
That's right.
to give an answer to that, the symbolism is important, and that's why the women officers were also chosen. And you can see one colonel and one wing commander; they also been chosen very carefully. So you could see the symbolism involved in that, and also a certain woman power, which again, Prime Minister Modi is very careful in projecting. So I think all this has come together to give a name Operation Sindoor. In that sense, it's a very clever formulation. That's what I would say,
Okay, so we at the federal have been
and
bringing a lot of.
certainly aimed at a domestic audience. Yeah.
That's right. So we at the federal have been bringing a lot of different experts lately, including Mr. Lieutenant General Huda as well. Who also said that there could be a limited strike of sorts. But do you see this particular strike, not just in Pakistan occupied Kashmir, but also in Pakistan, as some kind of a beginning of a full scale, blown out war between India and Pakistan? Because the Pakistan Army chief just said that the country will respond to India at a time, place, and by means of its own choosing.
Uh, Look, Pakistan so far has been conducting a kind of, uh, you know, a war against India, which is actually been proved to be quite useful for them, in the sense, instead of facing a outright war, which is not beneficial to both India and Pakistan, but certainly not beneficial to Pakistan at all, because Indian armed forces are much bigger in size, and if there were to be a full-fledged war, obviously India will have an upper hand. And in the previous conventional wars, I'm not
Hmm.
bringing the nuclear element into it. If you say India has won all that battles hands down against Pakistan,
Hmm.
so but what has as a strategy for Pakistan, it has proven far more deadly for India is this. Uh, you know, training terrorists and sending them across the border. And it's not just India. Pakistan has been doing it with other countries also. With even with Afghanistan. So it's kind of become a state policy where
Hmm.
basically armed militants are trained and sent across to create trouble across the border, and that tactics have that has helped in Pakistan in many ways, because it's a low cost option for them. So, would they like to abandon and go for something like this? Is one question. But obviously, there would be pressure on Pakistan establishment also, because the Indian armed forces have demonstrated that they
Hmm.
can actually choose a placing of their liking, and they have gone deep into Pakistan and struck. The missiles are struck. So there would be pressure on the army chief as well, because unlike India, in Pakistan, army, ISI are all, the deep state is actually the state there, and they control the power, levers of power. Though there is a democratically elected uh, prime minister and all those things, but still these guys, wield enormous power there.
Hmm.
So maybe for his own domestic audience, whether he would like to send some message is something. But I feel that this full-fledged war and talk of all that, uh, one has to really wait and see. If this really depends on what is the kind of damage that has been caused on the other side.
Hmm.
That assessments, we really don't know, because the information flow has been pretty slow, and more and more such details come. We would really know what kind of retaliation Pakistan would like to do. But certainly they would like to uh, do, and whether it continue with their policy of training terrorists and sending them across the border, or they try something else, is one has to wait and see. But here, certainly, all the terror models, whichever places they were being trained, the training infrastructure, have received a serious, attack from Indian side.
Okay, so reactions from world leaders are quite crucial at this juncture, right? I mean, you had the U.S. President Donald Trump, addressing the reporters in the morning, where he called the strikes a shame, and quite surprisingly there, and including the China, world leaders have also sort of urged for restraint and de-escalation between India and Pakistan, including China. So, but interestingly, Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke with Prime Minister Modi on a telephonic conversation before the strikes, and where he said that he pledges full support for India in its fight against terror. So now, how do you interpret these varied international responses?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The situation today is very different from what we saw in 1971. In 1971, Russia was strongly with India, and America was against us. And we had a certain difficulty when Indira Gandhi was the PM then, and she had a very frosty relationship with the American leadership there. Things are not same today. India is actually quite friendly with the US, and PM Modi is a kind of enjoys a certain rapport with Trump. Uh, so we enjoy a better global relationship today in that sense, and we also have a good relationship with Russia. Um, so even China, though it has made these statements, it's never participated in a third party conflict. It has restrained itself, kept itself out of it. And basically, this is more of a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. And the world, however, wouldn't like to encourage an actual war. They would be quite worried because the world is already seeing two wars, one going in between Israel and Palestinians, which there was a fear that it will further spiral out and engulf the entire Middle East. The other one, which is still going on, and is Ukraine Russia. At this point of time, when there's a certain trade conflict going on between US and the rest of the world, and two conflicts, big conflicts already. I don't think world expects are prepared for a third one. So obviously there would be a lot of uh, diplomatic pressure also, back channel talks and other things to try and stop any further escalation of this conflict. That's what I suspect uh, would happen. But I'm not a soothsayer to say what might happen.
Okay.
But it really depends on how Pakistan reacts. But certainly, the world doesn't want to see another conflict.
Okay, so one last question there, sir. We understand that the Pakistan economy is in tatters right now. The country was in the verge of bankruptcy before the IMF bailout there. And what do you think could be the economic impact of current tensions? We had the Moody's report that just come in, a couple of days back, where it said that Pakistan's economy is quite fragile. If even if there is sort of a limited sort of an escalation with India there. But the report did say that the India's fundamentals have been strong. How do you see, provided there is a full scale sort of a potential conflict there, and how do you see it impacting Indian economy?
So I hope there won't be any full scale conflict. I hope there won't be any. Obviously, any conflict of this nature, especially between two adversaries, India and Pakistan, which are neighbors and both are nuclear powered, will have a devastating, impact on the market. See, it's not Indo-Pak trade, which is never been so significant. It's not just that. Beyond that, what impact it makes, in India, is a question. Obviously, Pakistan, compared to the two countries, Pakistan is in really bad shape. It has gone to IMF, um, because the bailout they had to go for a bailout because of the forex situation they are facing. So they are not in a very happy situation. But certainly, war doesn't help anyone, and it would certainly have an impact on Indian market. Like today, you saw the markets; they have been going through a turmoil. There's been a lot of volatility in the market. There is an uncertainty already happening because of global trade. Though India is pretty much dependent on domestic trade, and it is not so much dependent on global trade, but yet, it's a given that India, world is interconnected, and it will have an impact on India. So, talk of a war at this point of time certainly is not a, a welcome, is not some, any market would welcome. But uh, it really depends, how the political leadership is able to take it, convert it into a solid diplomacy. See, diplomacy is also war by other means. So basically, you use diplomacy as a powerful weapon to avoid a direct armed conflict. But then, in a situation where you have been receiving attacks repeatedly, last 30, 40 years, India has been a victim of terrorism, where cross border terrorism is actually limits your own development. uh, it's something which need to be stopped. So India is justified in saying that, and that's the justification today the government and the ministry officials try to give, that look, we have been a victim and been constantly struck at, and they listed the whole kind of attack which has been happening, from parliament attack to Akshardham attack to Red Fort to, there have been series of attacks which have been happening to Mumbai, to now Pahalgam, where civilians are killed, innocent civilians who went for tourism. So there must be some response to this as well. The thing really now is, uh, where do you balance? It's like, when we in economy we talk about growth and development. Here we have to talk about India's defense and growth. That's where it comes to. So I think the priorities really depends on the situation we are facing in and the developing situation which will emerge in the coming days.